The scariest stories are the ones that are true.
1. The Crying Girl. When I was younger, probably like 10 or 11, I went camping with my family. I'll just get right into it. It was about 1 or 2 in the morning, and I couldn't really sleep. The tent me and my brother were in was really hot, and very uncomfortable. Anyway, while I was trying to go to bed, I heard a very faint whimper. I tried to ignore it because I figured I was just tired. Our campsite was along a road with many other camps nearby. The whimper started to get louder, and then turned into crying. I heard footsteps outside of our tent, and a girl crying. Now let me tell you, it didn't go faint, it got louder and louder. It remained in the same spot the entire time. That's so important because it indicates that she was looking at our tent site, crying. It gets worse, then it turned into a full-on scream for a few seconds, then cuts out. When she started screaming, my brother woke up. We both look at each other and just get all the pillows and stuff our head under them. I couldn't sleep at all that night. I'm just glad we left the next morning. 2. The Shaking. This happened to an acquaintance of mine and his son. This took place back in the early 90s. He had taken his young son for a father and son type hike out of Skagway. If any of you are familiar with Skag Patch, there is quite a network of trails above town at Lower Dewey Lakes. So, it's evening, dinner done, tent up, bedtime. Sometime later, around midnight, he's woken up by the tent shaking violently, then silence. Then again. Keep in mind it's late August, and pitch black. I mean as pitch black as you can get under the heavy coastal rainforest with no moon. This shaking kept up for over an hour. He had no idea what it was. He went out with his headlamp, yelled, and heard nothing. Would go back in the tent, then it would start up again. He could hear footsteps whenever it happened. He was pretty shaken up by the next morning, as you could imagine. He reported it to the troopers, and the only thing they could come up with was someone with a night vision setup messing around. Or something else. 3. The middle of the woods. This happened to me when I was little. I went camping with my older brother and my mom. I was about 7 or 8 and I went to bed around 10 in a sleeping bag inside my tent with both my mom and brother. Sometime during the night, I don't know when, I woke up somewhere in the middle of the woods still in my sleeping bag. I had no idea where I was or where my tent was. I screamed for my mom and I heard her calling back for me in panic, but she was easily 100 yards away or so. To this day I have no idea how I ended up in the middle of the woods still inside my sleeping bag. Gives me the chills. 4. Footsteps upstairs. Not something I experienced, but my sister and her husband did. My family used to have a cabin on a lake in the North Woods. It's a lake with no public access. On the other side was an old girls' camp that the state was letting fall apart. The camp had a large, 2-story main house that was mostly intact at the time. My sister and her husband decided to check out the camp one day. They canoed over and started to walk around. They went into the main house first. They walked around for a bit, and then they heard heavy footsteps upstairs. These footsteps turned into someone running heavily towards the stairs. My sister and her husband booked it out of the house, but they could hear the steps coming down the stairs and on the main level as they ran out. They opted to run around the house instead of heading back to the shore. They never saw who it was, but they heard them enter back into the house. And then they heard them storm back outside again. They went into the woods this time and heard someone running in the woods after them. They took the long way around the lake back to the cabin. My dad and I had to go back later that day to get the canoe. We never heard or saw anything.